All right, everybody. This week is exciting. It's books, and I got a lot of books to go through. Before going through them all, just want to say, as a young coach, your goal should be to take a deep dive, to understand what it is you're doing from a training perspective as succinctly as possible. Know the science, know the history, all that other stuff. And then from there, it's branching out. As you grow as a coach, it's less about those specific training books and more about tying things back together and connecting it. So since I only have a couple minutes, let's jump in and get started. Number 1, why zebras don't get ulcers. This is the stress response right here. Easy read, learn how we stress and adapt. If you want to go on from that and get the complex side of it, this book. Harder to understand, more science, but again, the foundations of how we adapt to anything. That's important. Let's jump into the strength and conditioning side. This book right here, Strength Training and Coordination by Franz Bosch. Bosch makes things really complex, sometimes too much so. But this book is worth a read because it'll make you think. From there, strength and conditioning. My good friend Vern Gambetta's Athletic Development. Foundation of exercise right here. Understand it. Nice, simpler read. We go into training. Canova's little small guide to the marathon. Okay, this will open up your eyes to the marathon. Good read, can get off the IAAF website. A couple books that I don't have with me that are stored away. How They Train by Fred Wilt. Great book on the 60s and 70s and 50s of the training they did back there. The Van Aken Method by Ernst Van Aken. Great coach in the 70s again. And then any original Arthur Lydiard work you can get on. Read it. Still on the training side. The Science of Winning by Jan Obrecht. More science-based, but really opens your eyes to the balancing act of aerobic and anaerobic demands. Really good book. Going into the history a little bit, we've cited this one a lot. Run, Run, Run. Foundational text right here. Get your copy. Again, know your history. Training with Cerruti, written by an athlete who went and trained with them. Probably the easiest to comprehend of the Cerruti books, but you got to get his own original writing as well. How to Become a Champion. This is less training. More about coaching and becoming a champion, as it says. Really, really good book. Get your hands on it. And then the best modern explanation of Lydiard, Healthy Intelligent Training. Really recommend it. And then finally on the training side, this gigantic behemoth, Swimming Fastest. Good understanding of swimming training. Translates over to running. You only have to read about half of it because half of it is technique stuff unless you want to go into training. Then, from there, biomechanics and injury prevention. Biomechanics, classic text. Tom Tellez told me to read this. Dan Paff says he reads it every couple years. Mechanics of Athletics. Read it. My friend Jay DeSherry, Anatomy for Runners. Easy to understand. Great breakdown of running form. Super helpful on injury prevention. A little more complex than the science, but a really good read of summarizing the latest research. Bino Nig on biomechanics of sports shoes. Good stuff. From there, we go into more of the soft side of coaching, which is often neglected, but again, as you branch out. The Captain Class, recently released. Sam Walker did a great job. Read it. It's on leadership. Top Dog by Poe Bronson and Ashley Merriman. This is all about competing, the science of competing. You're going to learn a lot from this. Okay, take it away. Going into the psychology a little bit. The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin. Phenomenal book right here. Title explains it. Read it. Another classic, The Inner Game of Tennis. Psychology of learning, competing, all of that good stuff. Short read, gotta read it. Slightly newer book, How Emotions Are Made. So fatigue is an emotion. This will change your viewpoint on how athletes deal with fatigue, pain, happiness, sadness, all that good stuff. Really good text. A little long, but if you like the science. This one's titled, doesn't explain at all, The Psychology of Desire. No, this isn't some relationship book. It's on motivation. Really good summary of the science of motivation and desire, which is, you got to learn that as a coach. Last psychology book, Understanding Others, is probably the most important thing we have to do as coaches. First, we got to understand how our mind works and how our brains work. Strangers to Ourselves, really good read, understanding, again, psychology, how we see things and how that interacts with the world. Really enjoy it. Promise we're almost done. Venturing into the philosophy a little bit. Again, branching out as I grow as a coach. This book has been hyped in every coaching aspect in the world, but it's well worth it. A lot of principles can be taken away from Anti-Fragile. Status Anxiety, Alain de Botton. Anything you can read of his, I think, is well worth reading. This, I think, is great for coaches and athletes because it puts success in perspective and makes you realize how we define success, ultimately influences how we live life or run or coach or whatever we do. A couple more. Just How to Stay Sane. Again, this is by Philippa Perry. Really interesting read. Short from de Botton's School of Life series. We're coaches. We go crazy. It's well worth it. And then, actually, a writing book. So the elements of style. What is a coach going to get out of this? It's short, sweet, and breaks down the principles of writing in, less than 100 pages. I think it's, actually 60, 70 pages of actual content. And this reminds you how to break down your training philosophy, your coaching philosophy, simplify, get it short. And then 2 classics, On the Shortness of Life, by Seneca, really worth the read. And then finally, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Just great lessons on life that are 2,000 plus years old. You're going to take away a lot from this. So there you go. Throw a lot of books at you. The idea isn't to read all of them, but to see what grabs your attention and read. Hope you enjoyed them. All of these books will be listed in the show notes at Science of Running. Thanks for watching. If you like it, please hit subscribe, share it, tell your friends, all that good stuff. It helps us do it. And again, from a reading perspective, read as much as you can. Not only books, but also journal articles and other good resources. But again, my suggestion for young coaches is dive deep. Even if you don't understand it, go as deep as you can, and one day it's just going to click. And once it clicks, you're going to know what is good or is bad, and then branch out. Read beyond your own philosophy, your own endeavor, your own, what's the word I'm looking for? Your own little category of coaching. Thanks.
Okay, week 3, still on the topic of things that have influenced us. Last week was people, this week is books. I didn't look no further than my desk here at the Brooks HQ. Steve Magness will love this because it's nerdy and it's science. This is Exercise Physiology, 5th edition. It's been by my side since the first day of grad school. Now, years later, still there. That foundation from the science allows me to improvise and be more creative. So even though we talk a lot about the peripheral parts here with coaching with craft, having that foundation is important. And so understanding metabolism and what science knows about us is huge. Bouncing off that, Dr. Dick Daniels' book, The Running Formula, I still use the VDOT formula. Been coaching for a while now. If I coach for another 50 years, I will still use that table. He bridged the gap, I think, with sports science and running really well. Arthur Lydiard, Running to the Top. I mentioned his name to one of the beasts, and they looked at me like, I've never heard of Arthur Lydiard. You read anything he's done. For me, what stuck with me was how he programs and periodizes and looks at the big picture. And he had a reason for everything. He was a teacher, an educator, and so, yeah, that's an essential book for a coach. When I got the job with the Beast, I read 2 books. One was Phil Jackson's Sacred Hoops. Everybody knows, if they've watched at least the first 2 episodes, I'm from Chicago, so Phil Jackson is a legend in my mind. But how he got all these stars to buy in to the program and buy into the team and buy into each other is one of the things reason why I wanted to read it. And so I've read that a couple times since I've gotten this job. Great book. And then the other book I read was Fighter's Heart by Sam Sheridan. And so the author traveled around to different fighting clubs, like every different type of martial art, and boxing and jiu-jitsu and even chicken fighting. He was down checking that out, dog fighting. But what indirectly that stuck with me was he went to this fighting team in Iowa called Pat Milichek's Fighting Systems, and they were the most successful team at the time. But the team environment is what he took away that made these guys, these men and women, stars and made them champions. And then he also traveled with Andre Ward, who's a boxer, gold medalist. He's a title holder currently, but his coach didn't use a weight room. And so those were 2 things that I wouldn't have thought that I would have taken to this job now, but I'm glad that I read those books. And then more of like philosophy side of things, The Alchemist is something that I think most people have probably read. It's a super popular book. I loved how what stuck with me is breaking the monotony, fear being the actual obstacle, and that's true. I mean, even today I had some things I'm like, am I just scared? Is that why I do not want to take this risk in training? And always taking action is another thing the book talks about, and that being passive is a death sentence, I think, in this field. And so, great book. Other philosophy book would be Fight Club, which probably some people not consider that, but if you've watched the movie, read the book just because it makes you think about it a little bit more. You'll spend a little bit more time with it. But I do think we're always at a little bit of a spiritual war with ourselves and with maybe even with others. And I really like asking those types of questions with this job. So read the book and read all 7 of them. I don't read that much. I get made fun of by John Marcus on here because I'm probably the least read guy by far. But so if I can read these, I suggest at least browsing through them. And on to next week. Thanks for watching.
Hi everyone, this week's episode is about which books most influence us as coaches. And the one that probably stands out for me as an Australian distance runner, and one that I've probably taken very much into the marathon training that I do, is Steve Moneghetti, In the Long Run. I would suggest probably most Australian distance athletes have read this one, and it's probably a really good one to read internationally as well. I even once in an English class talked about running as my religion and held that one up as my Bible. And for a Catholic school, I'm not sure how well that went down, but still, it was a really important book to me, and I learnt a lot from it. And I've got to know Steve in the time between reading it and now, and certainly one that's influenced me significantly. The other top Australian marathon book is Deke. Can never go past a guy like Deke. Absolute champion marathon runner, and these days a very inspirational bloke. Really does a lot with the Indigenous society here in Australia, and helps them to learn how to run marathons and be healthy in their own communities. Deke's book and Moneghetti's book has some really interesting themes about training, and probably has influenced my thoughts quite significantly, and I dare say the majority of Australians distance running. So 2 really, really good books. And I know we've got some Cerity fans in our group, so the one that I will hold up next is one that I actually stole from my school library. I hope they're not watching this, but I thought no one else is really reading it. It hadn't been borrowed since 1984, so I snuck it into my bag on the way out. And that is Herb Elliott, The Golden Mile. It's a bit tattered, but it is an unbelievable read. Really details a true legend of Australian running and Australian sport, and really looks into some of Cerity's training and how he as a coach influenced Herb Elliott. And I think that's what probably had the greatest impact on me. So Cerity is an amazing coach. Herb Elliott is an amazing pupil. When we look at some of the sciences, there's probably 2 books that have probably influenced me more than most. One which I picked up all the way back when I was in college in the US at the University of Memphis was Daniel's running formula. This one here probably taught me how to really put some structure into my training. I wouldn't necessarily say that I stick directly to what Daniels prescribes in this book, to the timing and all the rest of it, but certainly did make me think about how I structured it, how I put my phases together, what sort of paces I prescribe to certain elements of training. And so I think that one there, I have to give a lot of credit to how I sort of put my head around all of that and tried to put some structure into what I was doing. One of the more recent books is by an Australian coaching legend, I think, and that is Dick Telford. It's quite a new book, but it's running through the Looking Glass. Still got my notes in the top of what I've read. Now, Dick's book is fantastic because really what it does is take some quite complex things and really breaks it down so that a guy like me, who's not the most scientific guy, can really make some good meaning out of it. Dick's book is really one that I'd suggest hopefully gets a bit more airtime overseas, because he's done some amazing things with runners in the marathon, more recently with Lisa Waitman and Michael Shelley, but ultimately has a record of coaching that shows some incredible performances over 1,500 right up to the marathon. So one that people really should get their hands on, Dick Telford, Running Through the Looking Glass. Enjoy it. Thanks.